Never buy these 5 types of homes in South Florida. Number 1, let's start with flipped homes. Flipped homes typically, and we've seen this a lot in the last few years, homes that were really dated, that have had lipstick on the pig, a quick fix, a nice bit of paint here, bit of millwork there, but ultimately not really a lot done to these. And again, then a big premium slapped on top. There's nothing wrong with making a profit, but the thing you've really got to be aware of about those flipped homes is that sometimes they're done without permit, sometimes they're not done to code, and sometimes they've cut so many corners that you don't actually typically see the problems with a home until long after. And because they're being flipped, that first buyer doesn't know either. They have no idea what may be behind the walls, whether it's the electric or the plumbing, seals on the windows. They will cut corners behind the scenes where it's not visual, because again, they're just looking for that visual change of the property. So things like the roof, like I said, the trusses, the wiring, the flooring, the subflooring. There's a lot of things that get fixed up. I've been through it with a client right now who bought into a house. I didn't sell them that house, but they bought a house from someone else and they said, "This is great, isn't it pretty? It's all remodeled." It's like, and it was marketed to them as a new home, and it wasn't. The flooring, the subflooring was inadequate. There was mold hidden behind the walls. There was a lot of nasty things that came up and bit them in the arse. And unfortunately, you've really got to be careful with those flipped homes. So when you see a house that you like the look of, give me a call. I can look back and I can see when it was previously sold, how it looked when it was sold, how long it's been since then. And again, there's a lot of digging that you need to go into. Sometimes you have a home that gets remodeled and a family move in and they live in it and their circumstances change. But when you see flipped homes, it's very easy to spot those. And those are the ones typically I would say stay well away from. So here's a tip to go with that to help you. And I'm going to add tips to all these points. Hire a very reputable inspector, one of the bigger inspectors who are bonded and licensed, who know the job and know what they're looking for. Bring in a structural engineer. There are a lot of professionals out there that for a few dollars can save you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands on the back end. So important to make sure you get that right inspector into the property and look for it. Also, ask for permits. Look for permits and plans. I can't tell you how many properties I see out there that are misrepresented. The square footages are wrong, the spaces are wrong, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on which really isn't to code or even accurately described. So you really got to make sure as you dig into these properties. And very often I see a lot of these flipped properties get listed by no-name agents. Typically, it might even be the seller themselves who've got a license in real estate just so they could start selling their flip properties. Because they're not under any scrutinization for a large brokerage house that has very strict rules and regulations like Douglas Elliman, which is my brokerage house, they can pretty much get away with saying what they want, do what they want, and have really little consequence. And it's not until you close on that house or that condo that you suddenly find out that things are not all what they appear to be. Next point, homes, particularly family homes on a busy street. It's really important to know, and as a demographer I always say this, it's got to be fit for purpose. Look at who's buying this type of home. Families, especially with kids, do not want to live on a busy main arterial street, and homes for sale on those kind of busy location streets run around and should run at around a 15 to 20% deficit of the sale of homes on private streets, quiet streets. Obviously, cul-de-sacs and dead ends and gated communities add even more of a premium. So try to go for those if you can, but I would typically say stay away from the busy streets, because in my experience, they are absolutely, I say impossible, but they're much, much harder to sell. Why? Because families don't want their kids running out onto a busy street getting hit by a car. They want a quiet street. So don't be sold on how pretty the home is, just how nice it is on the front. Consider the location. Location is obvious. And again, stay away. Also consider what's behind the house. There are a number of streets in Miami that I can think of, and I can tell you what those are if you give me a call, that back up to busy streets. Those can be a problem too. Why? car noise and traffic noise. Make sure when you go and see these homes, you're not seeing them at, 4:30 on a Sunday afternoon when like no one's around on the streets, although that's kind of hard to do these days because Miami is a pretty busy city. But there are areas where you might not hear a car go by for a while, but suddenly 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, you realize the house backs up to a main highway or dual carriageway or a US 1 or a 95, and you're like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of noise. Be wary of those and generally steer clear of them. My third point, and this is really important, is properties in a flood zone. Okay, I've done 2 podcasts on this with Hugo Garcia, who used to work for the insurance carrier Citizen, and now he obviously fights them in court. The insurance situation is changing. It's already been changing an enormous amount through 2024, and into 2025 it's going to change even more. Every time there is a major storm, the premiums can and will go up. And there are a number of houses that are in these flood zone areas that are not new homes. Older homes at lower elevations in a flood zone area should absolutely be avoided. Because here's what's going to happen. Sooner or later, and probably sooner, those homes become uninsurable. And when they're uninsurable, that means that the owners have to go bare, which means they can't carry insurance in order to have the home, which means they've got to be cash buyers. And then secondly, on top of that, you end up in a position where the house, sooner rather than later, ends up having to sell for land value. So a beautifully remodeled older home in a flood zone area, don't go anywhere near those. If you want to be in a flood zone area, which I do understand, flood zone areas often mean being close to the water, which is, of course, it's desirable. But make sure you go for a newer home at the right elevation and ask for the elevation certificate. Look at the elevation of that home. And taking it one step further, play with tools like the FIU Storm Surge Simulator. I sit on the board at FIU. I work within their School of Real Estate. It's a very fascinating and a very powerful school, the #1 research school in the world, in fact. And they have some great tools that will help you understand the risk of that particular house should a hurricane come through at level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A tip, again, look at the FEMA zoning, do your research, look at the foundations of the property, look at the elevations, consider all these variables. The next one, which is almost the same, it's almost equally as important, is those bigger, older homes. Again, those older homes also come into the conversation about the flood zone situation. But older homes and bigger homes need more maintenance. You've got a lot of roof, you've got a lot of electric, you've got a lot of plumbing, and more is not always better, it's just more. Now, bigger land, of course, is valuable. Land is the one thing they're not building any more of. And I'll typically say, look, get a home on a bigger lot, the better. But be aware of some of these really big older homes that are dated and architecturally compromised. What do I mean by that? I mean low ceilings. I mean no ways to open those houses out, to open them up, that have small windows. These are the houses that ultimately will get sold as a land deal and they'll get knocked down. And it's okay to get those homes if you're buying it around the land value price. And there's a lot of value in that, in fact. But be wary of just those big for big's sake, because sooner or later you're going to realize that you don't use all of that house and you're going to spend your time between the kitchen and the master bedroom. And maybe sometimes the dining room and the formal living room. But those older style homes. But let's move on to number 5. Buying the most expensive home in the neighborhood. And it's such an obvious thing to say, but it's amazing how many people don't have the analytics to actually really understand their markets and know where the ceiling of the market is. I am very much all for buyers going out there and buying the least expensive home in the neighborhood. Buy into a neighborhood where the dollar per square foot ceiling is particularly high. And I can give you working examples of that. And it's not just neighborhoods, there's actually subsections, gated communities, and little quadrants where the ceiling is particularly high. And that's great because it means that there's room for appreciation. But if you go out and you buy the most expensive home in the neighborhood, you're buying at the ceiling. And that can be problematic, especially if you don't see other homes around the area that are kind of like that. And that, if you watch my condo version of the video, kind of is similar to what I say when I get into condos can have a similar kind of problem. You also don't want to be sometimes in a super expensive condo in a really bad neighborhood because it's never going to evolve. Neighborhoods don't change as fast as we think they do. I know sometimes people talk about it, say, oh, this is a neighborhood in transition, it's emerging. Yes, certainly, yes, we can see that. But it doesn't happen overnight. So just be aware. And one of the best ways to actually figure out as well, sometimes if you are buying towards the top of the ceiling, is understand what's being built around you. I say to all my buyers when they come with me and we look in the neighborhood, let me show you what's under construction right now, because that's a really good indication of what else is going to sell next at the higher price points, because ultimately it's the newer homes built to a really high custom level. Those are the ones that sell at top dollar. Conclusively, the Miami real estate market has plenty of opportunities. I've been selling it for nearly 15 years and there are a lot of great options out there, but it's also very easy to make a mistake. And I think that's why it's so important to go with an agent who understands the market, analyzes the market, has the optics of the market, and very importantly, respect your needs and wants. Respect what it is that you actually really need, and make sure that you're paying attention to fundamentals of the market. Don't get caught up sometimes with sometimes the shiny thing in the room. We can really go into these properties and I can identify sometimes when we just see gloss on a property and when it's really substantial. And there are quantifiabilities to value that I have very clear. And I can measure this. All of these things, these elements, you should be able to quantify. Even though some can be very unique, everything can be quantified. I like to think so. So conclusively, avoiding these high-risk properties can yield you long-term upside benefit. Peace of mind, I think, is probably the biggest thing that it will give you, and certainty that you bought the right property at the right time, the right price. As always, thank you for watching. If you'd like to know more about your needs and what you want to buy, and I can help you with that, give me a call. See my information below. As always, please subscribe, please like. We're trying to grow our following, and enjoy the rest of our videos, including our incredible podcast, Better Decisions. Thank you.